Okay, so this class I will introduce the function notation. And again, I'm not too sure what you guys do in grade 9, but I think this is something that you haven't seen before. Okay, so this might be something new for you. But what you have seen is my starter question. Okay, so I guess the only tricky part with the starter question is, so I'm asking you to determine whether the following relation, right, between, let's just call this set x. Okay, so this is my set x, and let's just call this y. Okay, and there's a reason for that, right? As you can see, eventually we're gonna have to do functions, so let's just stick with x and y. I want you to tell me if this is a function or not. It's obviously a relation, right? Because there is a relationship between x and y. Um, and also tell me what the rule is. Okay, so find the pattern. What happens to the x value um, um, in the y set? Okay, so what do you think is happening over here? Okay, what do you need to do to your x value, I guess, to get the y value? Okay, so pause the video, copy the question down, and then figure out the pattern. Okay, so the pattern will be your rule. Okay, so do that. And obviously I'm going to continue. Okay, so let's start with whether or not it's a function. Okay, for this to be a function, right? Each element in my x set can be associated to maximum one element to my y set. Okay, so, or the way your textbook says it, exactly one element, right? And as you can see, that is the case. Okay, so minus one, gets attached to minus two. Right? You don't have a situation where, for example, let's say 0 is attached to 0, but also 2. Okay, you don't have anything like that happening. Okay, so this is a function. It is a function. And what is the rule then? What is the rule? Why is this a, well, first we know that it's a function, but what is the rule of the function? What happens to my x value? Um, what do you need to do to your x value to get the y value? And if you think about it a little bit, you'll see that each value gets multiplied by 2, right? So minus 1 times 2 is minus 2, 0 times 2 is 0, 1 times 2 is 2, and 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, so that's the rule. Okay, so to answer the question, you have function. Okay, is it a function or not? I'm going to put a check mark to say yes, and the rule is y is equals to 2x. Okay, so this is what I mean, I guess this is what we're um, kind of like working towards. Okay, so this is eventually what we will be doing, but let's just present it in a way that kind of makes sense. Okay, so this is what we're looking for. But for the starter question, all I'm looking for are the answers. Okay, so these are your two answers. So now let's proceed to how can you visualize a function? Okay, so a function is it can be very abstract because this is math, but one way to visualize a function is think of the function as an input-output machine. Okay, so here your input are your q values. Okay, what this function does is kind of like my function, it's still multiplying, but now it's multiplying by 0.25. Okay, which is the same as dividing by 4 if you want. Okay, and then you get your output. Okay, so again, let's be consistent with the colors, I guess. So input, let's just use red for that. The rule, let's just stick with green, and then the output, so right, so your output will be kind of like part of your range, input would be part of your domain, right? So let's say if the q value, right, so let's say if the q value is 10. Okay, what your function will do is it will multiply 10 by 0.25. So maybe let me write this in green. Okay, so we will multiply 10 by 0.25 to give you an output value of, right, so when you multiply by 10, just move your decimal place over, so then your output would be 2.5. Okay, so right, you can put in any q value. I just chose 10 for just to give you an example. You could pick any value, and for each value that gets put into this machine, the machine will multiply that value by 0.25 all the time. Okay, so when the input q is quarters the output? Okay, so yeah, so let's not worry about that. Let's just focus on this. Okay, so the rule over here, right, is V, right? So your output, they're calling it V instead of Y. You could call it whatever you want, right? So they're calling it V, and the input is Q. Okay, so as it turns out, V is just equals to 0.25 Q. Okay, so that's the rule. It just comes from here. Okay, kind of like the starter question. So since V is a function of Q, right, we can write this in function notation. Okay, so function notation will look like this. So it looks exactly the same as what I have up here, but because V is kind of like dependent on Q, right? Depending on what the value of Q is, we read this as V of Q is equals to 0.25 Q. Okay, so this, right, this will read as V of Q is equals to 0.25 Q. So that's the function notation. Okay, so for example, your function that you've seen, let me just give you an example. Okay, so before I give you the example, I guess let me point this out. This notation shows that V is the dependent variable and Q, and that depends on Q. Okay, so V is the dependent variable, Q is independent. Okay, so that's why it's V of Q. Okay, so I mean, it's not that difficult to understand why it's V of Q. So let me just give you one more example. Okay, so the functions that you've seen before, right? Let's just go with this one. So y is equals to 2x. Okay, so you see my y value over here depends on what the x value is. Okay, so this is how you've probably seen functions, but you can also rewrite this as y of x is equals to 2x. Okay, so this is the extra piece that we're adding now. Kind of like what we did over here, right? You had v, but because v was dependent on q, now you're writing writing it as b of q is equals to 0.25 q. Okay, so same thing over here, and there's actually there's an advantage of doing this, right? We're not doing this for no reason, and you will see what the advantage is in my next few examples. Okay, so let's move on. So we have this function over here. V is equals to minus 0.08t plus 50. Okay, so this represents the volume. So volume V in liters of gas remaining in a vehicle tank after traveling d kilometers. Right, d kilometers. The gas tank is not refilled until it is empty. Okay, so here we have relationship between V, which is the amount of fuel that you have in your tank, and D, the amount of distance that you travel. Okay, so obviously the further you travel, the less fuel there will be in your tank. Okay, so because again V is a function of D in function notation, right, to answer the first question, write the equation in a function notation, you're just going to say V of D is equals to the same thing, which is minus 0.08 D plus 50. Okay, so essentially the same thing as what you have up here. The only thing that you're adding is this piece over here. Okay, V of D is equals to that. Why D? Because V is a function of D. Okay, depending on how much distance you travel, your fuel will your fuel will change, I guess. Okay, it will decrease. Okay, so the further you travel, the less fuel you will have left. Okay, so now they're asking you determine the value of V of 600. What does this number represent? Okay, so what that means is, right, they are telling you, see, this 600 is your D over here, right? Because it's remember we have this V of D. Okay, so when they give you a number inside the brackets, it will always be your independent variable. Okay, so this is asking you to calculate V of D. So what will happen is you have V of 600, right? But remember your 600 is your D value. Okay, so that means you have this function, right? I'm thinking ahead. 0.08, right? Before you used to have a D, So you know what? Let me make this very clear. Okay, so this is what your function looks like. Okay, v of d is equals to minus 0.08 d plus 50. Okay, in function notation. Now, if you change the d, right? If you're replacing the d value by 600, then you're gonna have to replace this d value of 600 everywhere you see d in your function. Okay, everywhere that you see d will get replaced by 600. Okay, so this will equal to minus 0.08. Now this d will also become 600. Okay, so 600 plus 50. Okay, so I will have to use a calculator for this, so hold on 1 second. So if you multiply this out, minus 0.08 times 600, and then you add 50 to that, you're going to get 2. Okay? You're going to get 2. So what does this mean? Okay, what does this number represent? Okay, so remember, V is given in liters. Okay? So this means that after traveling 600 kilometers, your tank will only have 2 liters. Right? If you want, you could put the liters, right? Your tank will only have 2 liters of fuel left, which is not a lot, okay? And it kind of makes sense because, you know, usually when you drive close to 600 kilometers, your tank runs out of fuel, okay? So that's what it means, okay? Now, question C is asking you, so, you know, let me just switch colors. So determine the value of D when v of d is equals to 26. Okay, so again, let's just write the function again. So we have okay, you know what, I'm not going to write the function again. I'm just going to look at this function. I want you to pay close attention to this function over here. Okay, here they're telling you that v of d, not just d, here it was just d is equals to 600, right? Now v of d is equals to 26. So the whole thing over here, right, this is v of d. You're going to have to replace this by 26. Okay, so right, so you could write down the function again, but I'm just going to use this function. I'm going to replace v of d by 26. So 26 is equals to minus 0.08 d plus 50. Okay, so they're asking you to replace v of d, right? So that means if your tank has 26 liters of fuel, how far did you travel? Okay, this is what the question is asking. If your tank, right, if v of d, right, after traveling d distance, your tank has 26 liters of fuel left, how far have you traveled? Okay, so then you have to solve for d. Now, how do you solve for d, right? You have to kind of like rely on BEDMAS, okay, when you do algebra. So BEDMAS tells me that when I do algebra, I have to do algebra, right? I have to apply BEDMAS in reverse direction. Okay, why reverse? Because I already know my answer is 26. What I'm interested in is the value that I started off with. Okay, so this tells me that I have to get rid of addition and subtraction before I get rid of multiplication and division. Okay, so this comes first, and then this comes after. Okay, so you know what, let me just use a different color. So let's just go with green. So I have to take care of addition and multiplication first, and then I have to take care of I have to take care of addition and subtraction first, and then I have to take care of division and multiplication. Okay, so that means let's get rid of the 50 because it's addition. So minus 50 minus 50. So this disappears. And then I think that's minus 24, but I'll just double check. So 26 minus 50 is minus 24. Okay, so minus 24 is equals to minus 0.08 d. Okay, so this is minus 0.08 times d, right? So the opposite of multiplication, right? When you do algebra, you do the opposite so the opposite of multiplication is division. So you divide by minus 0.08, divide by minus 0.008. This will disappear, and then it will give you the d value. Then I'm just going to squeeze it in here. Okay, so you divide 24 by minus 0.08. That gives you 300. Okay, 300. And if you want to put the units, remember D, right? So let's go back to the question. D is given in kilometers, okay? So it will have to be 300 kilometers, okay? So what this question is telling you, well, I guess what the question is asking you is determine the value of D. So determine how far you would have to travel for you to have exactly 26 liters of fuel in your tank, okay? And the answer seems to be 300, okay? So yeah, function notation kind of tricky, right? Kind of tricky. So I think most of you should be familiar with what you see up here, okay? So this is how you used to do it in grade 9. Now in grade 10, the only tricky part is now we're kind of like, adding on the independent variable. So just to tell you that, hey, this function is a function of D, okay? And then, they're going to throw things like this to you. So this means V of 600 is equals, so they're asking you to determine V of 600, right? So that means this tells you that D is equals to 600, right? D is equals to 600. So plug in D is equals to 600 in your formula right over here, and then you will get the value of the V of 600, okay, which is kind of what I did over here. This one is telling you that V of D is 26. So this whole thing over here will get replaced by 26, and then you have to solve for your independent variable, which is D, okay, which is what I did, okay? So it's kind of tricky, but once you do a few examples, I think you'll get the hang of it, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to try solving this problem, okay? So pause the video, do this. I'm obviously going to proceed, but you can pause and then compare your answers, okay? So the equation C is equals to 25N plus 1,000 represents the cost C in dollars for a feast following an Arctic sports competition, okay? Where N is the number of people attending, okay? N is the number of people attending. So describe the function, write the equation in function notation. So we're just going to write the function in function notation. So, right, this C has to now have the independent variable in brackets. So C is a function of N, right? So C of N is equals to 25N plus 1,000, okay? So this is my function. Determine the value of C of 100, okay? So this tells me that inside my brackets, I am going to, let me, let me just write the function underneath over here and work this out for you. You know that C of N is actually equals to 25N plus 1,000, right? Now this over here tells you that your N value is equals to 100, and everywhere that you see N in your function will now have to get replaced by 100, okay? So C of 100 is equals to 25. I have an N over here, so I need to replace that by 100. And then just, use my calculator and work this out, okay? So 25 times 10 is 250, so 2,500 plus 1,000, right? I think it's 3,500. But just to be sure, I'm going to double check my work with a calculator, okay? So 3,500, okay? So this tells me that when there are 100 people attending, right? When there are 100 people attending, then the cost for a feast, right? So I think that the total cost for the food, I guess, will be $3,500. Okay, so again, you could put the units if you want because it says dollars. I'm not gonna be super picky. This is fine, but if they're asking you, right, what does this represent? So you can maybe write this out in English. That when 100 people attend, the cost will be $3,500. Okay, so you could write that in English. I'm not gonna do that, but this is fine. Okay, this is fine. And if you want, you could just put the dollar sign. Okay, now this question, right? I'm gonna use a different color for this. So here they're telling you that C of N is 5,000. That means I have to replace C of N, right, which is here, by 5,000. So that means the cost is 5,000. And I want to know, if the cost is 5,000, how many people attended, right? This sports competition. If the cost for the feast was $5,000. Okay, so again, you'll have to do algebra, and I don't think there is an n over here. Okay, so I'm essentially copying this function, right? This same function down here. The only thing that I've done is I've replaced c of n by 5,000 because that's what the question is telling me to do. Okay, so let me just use an eraser and kind of point that out, right? So this is telling me to replace c of n by 5,000, and then I need to solve for n. Okay, I need to know how many people are actually attended. Okay, so again, if you're confused, right, then think about BADMAS. So let's write BADMAS. What should I get rid of first? Because I am doing algebra, I'm gonna have to do BADMAS in reverse direction. So that means priority goes to addition and subtraction, so that comes first, and then next is division and multiplication. Okay, so I have an addition over here, so let me be consistent with my colors. So this is plus 1,000. To get rid of that, you have to do the opposite, right? So minus 1,000, minus 1,000 on both sides, right? Because it's algebra, right? So whatever you do on one side, you have to do the same thing on the other side. This cancels out, so this tells me that 4,000 is equals to 25n. Okay, and then how do you get rid of multiplication? We'll do the opposite, which is division, again on both sides, right? So this is probably 100. Sorry, not 100. I don't know. This is hard. So 4,000 divided by 25 is 160. Okay, so 25 and 25, they will cancel, so that means that n is equals to 4,000 divided by 25, which is 160. Okay, so this tells me that when 160 people attend, right, the cost for the feast will be $5,000. Okay, so that's what it tells me. Yeah, so I hope this kind of makes sense. Now to practice this a little bit more, I'm going to ask you to do homework questions. I know there's a lot of homework questions, right? So this video will, I'm going to post everything on Tuesday. I think I'm going to post both the videos on Tuesday, this one and the one before this. But you will have Tuesday and Wednesday to work on these two videos. Now, I know I'm giving you a lot of questions for homework because I think this is a somewhat challenging concept. So if you would like to receive more practice, then do as many questions as you can for each number. But if you kind of get it, right, then just do 6A and let's say F or whatever. So one easy one hard one. You don't have to do everything, right? So every student, I'm gonna let you decide how you want to do it. You don't have to do all the questions. Okay, if you get it, please don't do all the questions. If you don't get it, then do do at least two, right? Do at least two or three, right? And on a Thursday I will be holding office hours. So for those of you who are kind of lost, you're more than welcome to join in. It will be optional. And then I will give you, I will be able to assist you, okay? And then you can ask me questions and stuff like that on Thursday, okay? Other than that, we're done. So thank you so much, guys, okay? You have a nice day.